So what is the root cause of procurement challenges? Stick around, we're going to talk about that tonight. But first, good evening, Agile acquisition enthusiasts. Welcome to the Underground Digital Camper. It's Friday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Agile Acquisitions and Alcohol. Cheers. All right. Well, first, all my loyal fans, let me apologize. I have been a bit remiss in making videos. It has been a whirlwind for me, helping start a new company, as well as still doing all of the various activities I've been involved in. But these videos are very important to me because I enjoy the dialogue that it continues to bring out, and it helps to make me better because I have to give some serious thought around this important subject matter. And on that note, so on to tonight's episode, I want to talk about, just came back from a trip from London, meeting with Ministry of Defense folks and talking about acquisitions and how things work there and what their challenges are. And what I noticed was, they have different rules, different structures, most importantly, different terminology, but at the root cause, all of the challenges come down to being the exact same stuff we face here over in the US. And that is really an aversion to risk and a fear of protest. This is important because anytime you can sort of cross sort of cultural boundaries and kind of pull back layers and find out that at the root cause the problem is the same, that is enlightening to me. One, because it means you've probably really found the problem, and two, it means that a solution to the problem likely is applicable to more than just your own. So I think that's wonderful. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So risk and fear of protest. So this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we get concerned about risk, we get concerned about protest, so we want to be more specific on our requirements, more clear on how we're evaluating. And when we do that, we take longer. And we make the requirements very, very specific, which removes innovation. And what happens is industry gets interested in an acquisition, takes a very long time, ends up eating up a lot of their bid and proposal resources, time, money, so on and so forth. So then when they finally find out they won or didn't, if they find out they didn't win, they're not just upset. You've actually impacted their business a lot more than just not winning that particular activity. You've prevented them from access to others. So they protest, right? Because they one, are upset, and two, they probably feel they should have won or they wouldn't have submitted. So this is where I like to use a down select model to address this risk. I find down select reduces risk on everybody's part. And if you're using an acquisition where you're focused on outcomes and let the innovation from industry, who really are the experts, shine through and make your decision based on that, I think you get a better outcome. But the down select model, where you have a very light upfront lift, I like to say the amount of effort from both industry and evaluators should be commensurate with each offer's likelihood of winning. And that's just a way of saying, in the beginning, you have 1 in N chances of winning because you don't know how many companies are bidding. But you might be interested in an opportunity and you think you're qualified and have a good chance. So there should be a very light way to sort of shift or sift through the various vendors who think that about themselves, because some will be right, some will be maybe right, and some will be very wrong. In a typical acquisition model, all of those vendors would have to go through the entire process, as the evaluators would have to evaluate all of the proposals to get to the point at which they determine this vendor really never had a chance. So if white papers, DHS has used video submissions. I think that's kind of interesting way to do it as well. But some way that's very lightweight that industry can say, this is who we are, this is how we would generally go about solving this problem or how we've solved similar problems like this. And let evaluators take a look at them and say, yeah, these are the piles these vendors kind of fit in. Even in the worst case scenario where you might be wrong and a vendor wants to challenge this, they can. Then you're left with two really simple choices. One, let them back in because, okay, if they want to continue to pursue this activity, that's not really anybody's, it's more their risk than yours. And if they decide to protest, at that point, there's very little to protest, right? And you haven't lost much. But more importantly, they're less likely to protest because they've put significantly less resources into it. And then after you've narrowed it down to a pool of vendors that have a likely chance of winning, then it's much more reasonable to ask for more information and get more of a commitment from both sides to determine it. So I think that's a great way to mitigate the risk. But it's important to always consider where you're going to identify risk opportunities or risk mitigation opportunities, and put in place things to mitigate them as you work with industry, as you continue to kind of hone in on your tasks there. So it's an international lesson. I think it would work in London as well as it would work here and anywhere else where they're attempting to really overcome this sort of core foundational problem that everybody faces. So there you have it. That's what I see as a sort of underlining risk or underlining challenge that all acquisitions face, and an opportunity to potentially solve it. So thank you very much for tuning in, and until next week, cheers.